This is Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast where we bring Jesus into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. Really excited about today's guest, Pat Combs. He's a former Major League Baseball pitcher, Olympic gold medal winner, and a first-round draft pick back in 1988 by the Phillies. He's got a great story and some keen insight on many different topics, including baseball and faith. Before we get to our conversation with Pat, I want to tell you a couple ways you can stay in touch with us. The first is our website, sportspectrum.com. Make sure you check that out. Bookmark that site. Go there every single day, and you'll read a bunch of different stories all day long on the intersection of sports and faith, both articles on athletes and different people in the world of sports. We have devotionals there that you can read each morning, 6 a.m. Eastern. Takes about 5 minutes, not even that, 2 minutes, and you can start your day right with the Lord. And then every podcast is on our website too. So you might be working from home on your laptop. You can go to sportspectrum.com, find any of our podcasts going all the way back to 2017. Click play, keep it on in the background, and then go about your work and your day. But sportspectrum.com is the place to go to for all of our content here at the Ministry of Sports Spectrum. And then if you want to reach me directly, you can email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. That's my email, jason@sportspectrum.com. It comes directly to me. Would love to hear from you. Any feedback you have on today's show, any guest ideas, any stories that we should be covering, or maybe you just want to say hello, you can email me directly, jason@sportspectrum.com. And we are presented today by IJM, the International Justice Mission. And they're doing amazing work keeping people safe and free from violence. Over 150 million people around the world are being protected right now because of the International Justice Mission. You can partner with them, become a Freedom Partner. It's just $24 or more each month. It helps survivors of slavery and violence from the moment they're rescued until they're restored. They do an amazing, amazing work. You can partner with them right now by going to the website, ijm.org/TF. You can become a Freedom Partner and join the fight to end slavery in our lifetime. ijm.org/TF. We're also presented today by Compassion International. You know about Compassion, great partners with us here at Sports Spectrum, and they are helping children right now in crisis. And they got an amazing initiative called Fill the Stadium. And when I think about Fill the Stadium and all that's taken place this past spring, most of the events that Compassion International relies on to help sponsor these children in poverty were canceled due to the pandemic. It's left nearly 70,000 kids in desperate need of help. So this is your chance to join with Compassion and our pro athlete friends to help fill the stadium, releasing kids from poverty. This pandemic has magnified the needs of these kids that are truly in crisis, not just going into hunger, but we're talking about starvation. Really big issues here with these kids, and you can make that difference with Fill the Stadium and Compassion. So join me checking out Fill the Stadium. Here's the website, fillthestadium.com right now. Click the Give Now tab, and you're good to go. fillthestadium.com, and let's help these kids in crisis. Today on Sports Spectrum, Pat Combs joins us, the former MLB pitcher, author of the book More Than the Score, a first-round draft pick by the Philadelphia Phillies back in 1988 out of Baylor University. He spent 8 years in total playing pro ball with the Phillies and the Brewers. As a collegiate athlete, he represented his country as a baseball player for Team USA, the 1988 USA baseball team that won the gold medal in Seoul, Korea. For his collegiate efforts, he was inducted into the Baylor Athletic Hall of Fame. And now, having been retired for 20 plus years, he's in the business world, and he's now an author writing this book, More Than the Score, on sports parenting and cultivating virtue in our youth athletes. This was a great conversation with Pat, who knows baseball. We talked about the 2020 season and his thoughts on that. And then he shared a really great story of pitching against a future Pro Football Hall of Famer. Yes, I said football Hall of Famer that Pat Combs pitched against while he was a minor league pitcher with the Philadelphia Phillies, with the Reading Phillies, the AA affiliate. Great stories, great conversation here. Take a listen to Pat Combs on Sports Spectrum. Pat, welcome to the show, my friend.
Oh, Jason, what an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's great to see you. Great to talk to you. We could have talked offline for another hour because it's a lot of fun kind of sharing stories. But then I said, let's just hit record here and let's start sharing some stories on the actual podcast. So let me start with 2020. Just initially, I think being a former player, I'm going to probably ask this to all the baseball players that I talk to now that the 2020 baseball season is over. But I would just love to hear your thoughts on watching this abbreviated season, it wasn't a bubble, but it was sort of a bubble, and just your thoughts on how it turned out.
Yeah, Jason, it's been such an unfortunate year in so many ways for baseball, from a broad perspective. Of course, exciting to see that they were able to get part of the season off. And then, man, these playoffs have been spectacular. I think we've seen some of the best games. Game 4, I'll never forget that game. That was incredible.
What a game.
What a game. That's one of those instant classics. So, in many respects, as fun as the playoffs have been, it's been just an absolute disaster year. And I just read the article with Rob Manfred saying that, baseball looks like it's going to lose close to $9 billion. You just think about how does an industry recover from that? So you've got the pandemic, obviously, the influence of that on the game, all the social justice stuff that's going on. I think fans have reacted to that. And so it's just, God, what an incredible, crazy year. The prayer is obviously that baseball can recover. These owners are not in such financial straits, although it looks like there's going to be some teams that probably come up for some fire sales where a year ago you're looking at 20 to 25 years of nothing but gains and in a game that was in a pretty good state, before everything hit with the pandemic. So just really unfortunate. My heart goes out to the owners, the players, the league, because you don't anticipate something like this happening. So now it's all been a reactive year of how do we just get through this and how do we keep the players safe and healthy. And then, now you got to look forward to what happens next year. Are we going to be able to get the fans back in the ballparks? And if they do open the gates, how many fans will be willing to go back? So there's just so many question marks.
Yeah, at least they were able to finish the year, which was a big, I think, accomplishment in its own right, because there almost wasn't a season. And then when they started up, we had, these outbreaks with the Marlins and some other teams, the Cardinals, and suddenly you're like, how are they going to finish this year? Right. And they were able to do it. So I think there was some success there as well. And still being able to watch games on TV as fans has been wonderful. Do you like the DH, by the way? You're a National League guy. Do you like the DH in the NL? Are you wanting to bat here as a pitcher? And then what else? The extra inning rule, I guess, the 7-inning doubleheaders. Did you like the sort of tweaks that they made there? Because personally, as a fan, for me, I like the DH in the National League, and I'm a National League guy. I like the extra inning rule to an extent. I love the 7-inning doubleheaders. I got to imagine the players love that too. What's your take on those kind of tweaks in the rules that they instilled?
Yeah, well, Jason, you're talking to a former pitcher who really enjoyed hitting, and so of course I hate the DH rule. I can't stand it, but I like it from the fans' perspective. It does add a nuance, and it does keep obviously more hitters in the lineup. You hate to see a place in the lineup where it's just almost an instant out. So it does add some, I think, some great flavor to the game when you have the DH. The other rules, I think we got to be really careful in baseball that you don't get away from some of the guarded traditions that have made the game what it is. When you go into an extra inning battle, every pitch, just being a former player, understanding that nuance of going into extra innings, every pitch counts, right? Every pitch could be the difference of a ball game. And so I think you lose a little bit of that when you start putting guys at second base and start deviating from those rules. Plus, it affects the record books. That's the thing I look back at is, players are going to offensively that could benefit from that in their careers. So you really start to look forward and what will be the unintended consequences of these rule changes going forward. And I think baseball's got to be really protective of that. The fan base is very traditional. So I think when you start introducing these new rules, you have to look at, is this the best for the fans, or is this something that we're just trying to do to speed the game up? Of course, that's been a lot of talk about baseball dragging on, those games lasting longer than they should, and you lose some fans there. So I'm sure, look, they do all these surveys to figure out what's in the best interest of the game, but I think you got to be really careful with those new rules. I
still like, I'm a traditionalist too, like you, and I like the fact that you could go into 18 innings or 19 innings in a game until it's decided. And I know that players are like, man, that's like 2 full games in one. But as a fan, yeah, it might go into 3 a.m. and I might go to bed, like that Dodgers Red Sox World Series
Right.
a few years ago. But at the same time, I'm going to go back and I'm like, wow, this is awesome. You know, as I'm a New York Mets fan. I've been a Mets fan since I was before even you got to the majors. We'll go back to 83 and Darryl Strawberry coming up and Dwight Gooden and those guys. But I remember the Mets and the Astros in 86 had a game that went, I think it was 16 innings in game 6 of the NLCS.
That's right.
And hopefully in the playoffs, they keep it traditional. In the regular season, I see what they're doing. I could do without the extra inning rule. That's just me. But I do like the DH. And I know it's like sacrilegious to say that as a National League guy, but it helped the Mets at least be able to put a better lineup out there than having to bat, Jacob deGrom every 5th day.
Yeah, no doubt. There's some benefits in that. I from a fan's perspective, because I'm a fan now too,
Sure.
I do like that. And the pitcher traditionally, if they could bunt, they could help themselves out. Most of them couldn't hit. They just, they hope to put the bat on the ball. So look, I get that. I think it adds more offense to the game. I think that's great for the fans.
Pat Combs is our guest today on Sports Spectrum. He's got a new book. It's called More Than the Score. You can get it out everywhere books are found. So before you were an author and a fan, as you called yourself, and all the things you're doing today, you were a pro baseball player, and you were selected 1988 in the first round, 11th overall by the Philadelphia Phillies. So let's go back a little bit, and because you made it to the majors pretty quickly. A lot of guys don't make it to the majors in a year after getting selected. And you were there in 1989. What do you remember about being selected by the Phillies and what that meant? You played your college ball at Baylor and then coming to the pros.
Yeah. So, the Phillies back then in those days, they kept their draft pretty secretive. And it was a total surprise. I had not talked to the Phillies. When they selected me, in fact, when they called, I thought it was a buddy playing a joke on me. So the guy had to call me back, the scout at that time. And just of course, a great feeling to get drafted in the first round. And then to be able to play for a team that needed pitching, as you said, I got there very quickly. I think I was the first player MLB history to play in the minors and start at A ball, go to AA, AAA, then to the big leagues in the same year. Yeah. And so Andrew Jones did it a couple of years later. I think we're the only 2 still. But for me, that was the right time, right team, right place. The opportunity was just there. And I came out of college pretty polished because I had a great college career, great pitching coach named Sid Hudson, who had played for the old Washington Senators, had scouted for the Texas Rangers for a long time. Sid had joined the Baylor staff and really helped me develop into my 2 years at Baylor before I turned pro. So came in with really great expectations that I could help the Phillies right away, and it was helpful that they needed pitching at that time. I know a lot of players that I played with on the Olympic team '88. It took them 2-3 years to get to the big leagues because they just got picked by a team that was stacked in that particular position. So for me, it was a great benefit getting chosen by the Phillies.
Well, when you got selected too, I think people might be thinking, wait a minute, he got selected in '88. The 89 season is the year you're talking about that you went from single A basically all the way to the majors. So in '88, the reason you didn't, how did that work out, I should say, because you would normally go to rookie ball and report to, a pro team and kind of begin your pro career. But you were also, that was an Olympic year. And like I mentioned in the intro, you were a member of Team USA and that Olympic baseball team. So did you go right to Team USA after being selected? How did that work out?
Yeah, that's correct. So back if you remember, '84, '88, we were still using our amateur players. So all the college players played on the Olympic team at that point. So in '88, that's exactly what happened. We were drafted, and all the players who played on the USA team were allowed to sign and then put our signing bonuses into escrow until we got done with the Olympics. So we came back in August after the Olympic Games, and then most of us were picked to go play Fall Instructional League, and then we started our pro careers in that next season in '89.
Interesting. What was it like to be on the Olympic team? That's got to be a pretty cool thing. I mean, you were young too, 21, 22, and just the experience, you got a gold medal, just being around the atmosphere of representing your country. What was that like?
Yeah, Jason, there was no greater honor I've ever had than to put the USA on my chest and play for my country for 2 summers, '87, '88, both summers. We had an incredible team. In the '87 year, we had Ron Frazier, University of Miami coach, that was tremendous leader for us. We went down to Cuba actually in '87 and played the Cubans for the first time in 27 years in Havana. And so that was an incredible experience. That really kind of hardened us up as a team to be able to go that next season to Seoul, Korea, and compete for the gold medal. But Coach Mark Marquis from Stanford was our coach at that time in '88. But just an incredible time with some guys that we were not expected to win the gold medal. I don't think we were quite on par. If you were a fan back then, if you remember when we beat the Russians in hockey in '80, right? But we were certainly not expected to win that gold medal in '88. In fact, a lot of baseball people said the '84 team was more talented than an '88 team. But it was just one of those teams that came together. We gelled. The chemistry was just right. And we beat Japan 5-3 for the gold medal.
That was in Korea, right?
It was.
Yeah, that's such a cool experience. Do you realize you're in the midst of doing that this is something that you'll be thinking about, in your 50s now and reminiscing, or in the moment, are you just kind of just living it?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people go through those amazing experiences, but they don't appreciate it when they're in the midst of it until they can look back.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think at 21 years old, you're just dumb as dirt. You're just enjoying the experience. You're feeling like, man, this is really cool to play for the USA team. But then, obviously, as you get into your 40s, 50s, and you look back on that and you go, that was really special. That way more special than you probably thought at the time. Of course, we had our heads down. We were just trying to win ball games at that time. But yeah, it's as I look back on it, I tell folks, look, I had a chance to play in the major leagues, and it was a lot of fun. But I'll always remember those days. Putting on that USA uniform is the most special of my life.
That's awesome. So the next year in '89, you said it's one of those weird historical years in a lot of ways, with you and Andrew Jones going all the way through the minor league system and then eventually making your major league debut. Offline, though, we were talking, and I asked you, I said, did you play at Reading, which is the AA team in Pennsylvania, for the Reading Phillies back in '89? And you said yes. And I said, well, in '89, I would have been 15, probably a sophomore in high school, and usually going to a lot of Albany Colony minor league Yankee games. I'm from Albany, New York. So I saw Reading play Albany quite a bit in those years between probably 10 and 16 when I go to these minor league games. So I said, did you play against Albany? And you happened to say yes. And then you shared this amazing story, which I'd love for you to share here for our audience to listen to, about a time when you pitched in AA against the Albany Colony Yankees as a member of the Reading Phillies. Can you share that?
Yeah, and looking back, Albany Colony, you remember those Yankee teams. It was like an all-star lineup. In fact, those guys you saw in '89, most of them got to the big leagues, were playing for the Yankees in just
Absolutely.
a few years.
Yeah.
But they had this little-known guy leading off named Deion Sanders. And it was, for me, pitching against that lineup and against Deion was really cool because you just, idolized even some of those guys back then, knowing that they were going to be in the big leagues. But it was an interesting game. I came into Albany, just had one of those great games, a really cool night in it, and I had a no-hitter going into the seventh inning, and Deion was leading off the seventh and tried to drag bunt. He missed the pitch. So the next pitch, I buzzed his tower, threw and went under his chin, knocked him off the plate. And he, of course, how flamboyant Deion was. He jumped out of the box and made a big scene. And his manager or coach, I don't remember who, yelled out of the dugout and says, "That's exactly what you get for doing that." So I think Deion was still learning the unwritten rules of the game of not trying to break up a no-hitter with a drag bunt in the seventh inning.
Oh, my gosh. That's so great. If I remember correctly, this is all my sports brain working. '89 was the year he was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons as well. So he was playing baseball in the summer, hitting against guys like you, and then a couple of weeks later, probably going to training camp and going to play with the Atlanta Falcons on the NFL stage. What ended up happening? Was the no-hitter broken up? How did that game end? Do you remember?
Yeah, broken up in the eighth inning. I forget who the hitter was, but it was somebody good. So I wasn't too disappointed, but we did win the game. The funny conclusion of that story is years later, I was invited to Deion's Christmas party at his house, and Rich Eisen introduced us, and I said, "Deion, I got a quick story for you goes back to 1989. I told him that story. He says, "Man, that was you? I can't believe that, you almost killed me." And I said, "No, I knew where the ball was going, but you definitely had to learn that was not the right thing to do at that time." So
that's baptism by fire. That is exactly what that is. Our Sports Spectrum show today is presented by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. And this past spring, most of the events that Compassion International relies on to help sponsor children in crisis were canceled due to the pandemic. And it's left nearly 70,000 kids in desperate need of help. 70,000 also happens to be the average size of many pro football stadiums around the country that were once filled and now sit mostly empty. And each of those 70,000 empty seats represents a child in crisis who needs you, who needs us to step up and fill the stadium. I want you to think about this. The cost of a couple of tickets for a pro football game, food and drinks to the game that few can attend, that can help a child for an entire year if you help donate right now to Compassion International. Here's how you can do it. You go to the website, fillthestadium.com. Fillthestadium.com. You click Give Now, and you can help fill some seats in that stadium. Fill the stadium and help children in crisis. Compassion International, fillthestadium.com. We're also presented today by IJM, the International Justice Mission, and they believe that every person deserves to be safe and free from violence. And by partnering with local authorities to rescue victims of violence, bring criminals to justice, restore survivors, and strengthen justice systems, IJM is helping to protect more than 150 million people around the world from violence and oppression. That's a large amount of people. That's why we believe in the work that the International Justice Mission does. That's why we love having them as partners with us here at Sports Spectrum. But this is work that they cannot do alone. They need your help. They need our help. That's why I'm reaching out to you to consider joining them and becoming a Freedom Partner. Some of IJM's most loyal partners in the work of justice are these Freedom Partners. And your support of $24 or more each month helps survivors of slavery and violence from the moment they're rescued until they are fully restored. It may not seem like a lot to give, but I'm telling you, it's life-changing. So I'm encouraging you to join me in becoming a Freedom Partner today. It makes a huge difference in the world. You can visit the website, ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF to become a Freedom Partner, and thank you. So tell us about your faith. Tell us about your walk with the Lord and the importance of Christ in your life.
Well, it really came through sports. So growing up, Jason, my love for baseball, much like yours was, baseball was my God. It was my idol. My dream was to make it to the big leagues, and everything in my life was about that. And so when I got drafted by the Phillies, I'm in Major League Spring Training in 1989. And, you put that uniform on, the feelings were indescribable, knowing that I'd reached my dream and put on this Major League uniform. And so I'm in big league camp my first spring, and, go through that first week, and it's like your feet never hit the turf. But, Mike Schmidt comes in. Of course, that was his last year as a Philly.
That's right.
And he was still kind of involved in chapel as a chapel leader, especially in spring training. And so he had made an announcement on that next Sunday that we had chapel in the media room, and had asked the players to come to the media room for chapel. And I thought I got away from this stuff after I left Baylor. And so, I get up from my locker, walk into the media room, and we sit down, and I look around. There's only probably 12 or 15 players in the room. And I said, "So where's the rest of the team?" He says, "No, man, this is voluntary. You don't have to be here." I'm like, "Cool." So I started to get up and go out, and he pulls me back and says, "No, you're already here. Sit down and listen to the message." Well, the message that morning was given by a local Clearwater pastor named Steve Kreloff. And Steve was a Jewish Messianic Jew. So, he had come to Christ as a Jew. And so he's giving his testimony and talking about when he was in college, a roommate of his shared the gospel with him. And he, at that point, made a decision to trust Christ as his Savior, went to Moody Bible College, came back, and now is pastoring this church in Clearwater. Well, his story resonated with me. I grew up in a traditional home that, it was a Catholic home. We went to church mainly on Easter and Christmas. I had never asked Christ into my life, even though great seeds were planted at Baylor. I never did that. And so that morning, it just kind of hit me that, wow, here I am sitting here in this Major League uniform and still feeling some sense of my life not being totally complete. And it just hit me that morning. I've never done that. And so when Steve prayed at the end of his message, I raised my hand, and he came up and talked to me about getting together with me for a few days of spring training. Well, that ended up being like almost every day I went to his office. We went through the Navigator Study Series, and that really strengthened my faith. So he discipled me right after I made that decision, and just radically changed my life.
Wow. I love that story. Mike Schmidt, of all guys, like the Hall of Famer, Mike Schmidt saying, no, dude, hang out at this
Right.
chapel service, listen to this message, and it changes your life. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's as you know, that's how it often happens, especially in the game. You know, there's a player you respect, a player you look up to. They present something to you that maybe you hadn't heard or in that way. But I think it was just out of that great respect of knowing who Mike Schmidt was, and not knowing at that point that was going to be his final year in baseball, but knowing that he was a Hall of Fame type of player, and just him asking us to attend chapel meant a lot to me that morning.
That's so cool. Let me ask you about coming to the big leagues. The role faith played, how did that change you in the way that you approach baseball? Because you mentioned baseball was your God. And I think a lot of us, we're not all baseball players, but we're all working or something else can replace our relationship with the Lord, even on a temporary scale, whether it's even ministry and work that I'm doing. Any of those things can become a God. Watching sports and being a sports fan, sports can become your God in a lot of ways. So how did you kind of manage through that as you're having a lot of success, especially in that first year, as you went through the system very rapidly to get to the major leagues in September of '89? Tell me about your faith in kind of growing in your faith and trying to grow as a ball player at the same time. There had to be some tension there, I would imagine.
Oh, a ton of tension, Jason. I didn't do it well early on. In fact, I didn't look at my decision as a religious decision. For me, it totally turned into a relationship with Jesus. And so when I say my life was radically redirected, I mean, everything about me began to change. The way I talked, the way I thought, the way I treated other people, especially at that time, my girlfriend who later became my wife. I mean, all of that changed to the point where even people around me, close to me, said, man, you're kind of getting weird, and so I look back at that and say, in some instances, I didn't handle it well. When I think there's something to be said when you're starting to develop a relationship with Jesus. It's I think you have to be wise in those moments as well, in terms of not just hitting people over the head with things that you may be excited about and may be really zealous about, but they may not be there. And for me, it was just so radical. And that's the thing I look back and learn from, that, and what God did with me was that intimacy with him developed very quickly and very, very early in my walk. And so there was many times I turned my teammates off, and I'd kind of get in their grill about stuff that they were doing and their lifestyles and things. And then later on thought, that probably wasn't a really good way to handle that. They're nowhere close to God. Why would I expect them to act anything different? Right. So again, that relationship really meant a lot in terms of growing with God and learning how to discern, how to walk along with other people in that. So I learned a lot, and I was thankful that I had some other men that came into my life. You and I talked about Mickey Weston, who really well.
Yeah.
Mickey became a teammate, and he really walked with me early on in learning how to live out God's word. Tom Roy at UPI, just so many men that came into my life that really spoke truth and helped me to understand what God wanted from me and how to live a life that would be honoring to him.
I was looking at your baseballreference.com bio, which is what you do when you're interviewing a former baseball player, from my perspective. And I realized that you pitched your last game in the big leagues at 25. I know you pitched in the minors for a few more years, but I'm just wondering for you, because as a first round pick, there's expectations and everything. And suddenly that baseball is no longer at 28, I think was the last year that you actually played professional baseball. And suddenly it's gone. So what was that adjustment like to accepting the fact, I guess, that baseball was no longer? And I have to imagine your faith had to play a role in being able to move on, because for so many, it's hard to adjust to post-professional sports life when it's really all you've known. And in many ways, your identity is found in being a professional athlete or just an athlete. And suddenly you're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, definitely a challenge. And I think, too, looking back, I got to the big leagues very quickly, had some success early in my career at the major league level, and then got hurt, had elbow surgery, ended up having shoulder surgery. And then the train got off the tracks pretty quick after that. So I was out of the game by the time I was 30 years old. But I still look back at that, Jason. I'm very thankful, very grateful God gave me that time in the big leagues. And then my wife and I were on our third child. She was pregnant with our youngest, Casey. And she was having a tough time just with my schedule being away. And we already had two sons previous. So at the age of 30, I had three kids, and I was still trying to battle through these injuries. And I stayed in the game 3.5 years trying to find it again. And so I felt like when I was released from the Brewers in 1996 out of spring training, got in my truck, started heading down the highway, cried for about an hour, called my wife and said, honey, I'm coming home. I'm done. And I knew at that moment, God clearly spoke to me at that moment and said, I've got something else for you. And so that relationship, again, getting back to that intimacy with God, I don't know that I would have gotten through it like I did and was able to transition into business life as quickly as I did without knowing that at that moment that my career was over in baseball. But God had a different plan for me.
Your youngest son, Casey, you said he's playing baseball now too, right? He's in pro ball?
He is, yeah. He went to a D3 school in East Texas Baptist University, and was drafted in the 27th round in 2019. So he is a part of the Marlins, and unfortunately had his minor league season canceled, but he's been home working and gaining some weight and getting after it. So we'll see what God has for him next spring. But yeah, he's getting a shot as a catcher with the Marlins.
Nice. I hope that they have. I felt so bad I know a lot of the minor league guys from PAO and some other areas, and to have this season really be taken away from so many, just trying to make it in A, AA, AAA, because it's such a grind in the minor leagues. And a lot of these guys, maybe for hundreds of them, their opportunity will be no longer because of a season being lost. That had to be hard to watch as a dad.
Yeah, it really was. There was a lot of prayer and talking with Casey through those moments, because as you know, they went to the spring training. He got off to a great start in spring. They send all the players home. And the communication was, hey guys, we're going to try to bring you back at some point. And then probably halfway through the summer, they called and said, season's canceled. Do the best you can to stay in shape. And so, yeah, it's disappointing, especially when you're kind of getting your shot at pro ball. But he's got a good perspective about it. He didn't even expect to get drafted. And so he's very thankful. When the Marlins started cutting players, and they went through about 3 waves of cuts, about 42, 43 players were let go, and he made it through that. And he wasn't surprised. He said, Dad, I think they're looking at younger players that maybe have a shot at growing and developing. And it looks like that's what they did. They cut some of the older players, unfortunately, that had been probably in the system for 3 or 4 years. Yeah. So, he's going to get a chance to go back, and, we'll see what God does. But, yeah, it's just crazy summer, really, for those guys.
Pat Combs has been our guest here on Sports Spectrum. I want to ask you real quick about your book as we wind down. It's called More Than the Score. It released October 15th, and it's really focuses on sports parenting and coaches. And so many of us fail at this, including myself. I'm raising my hand as I say that. Just in parenting in the proper way to a child who plays sports. It's a struggle. All you got to do is go to an event and you'll see maybe what shouldn't be taking place quite often. Can you tell us about the book and how parents and coaches can cultivate this virtue of youth athletics like you talk about?
Yeah, Jason, it's, it really came down to my 45 years of experience in the game and looking at what parents are going through right now, trying to teach their kids about sports and have them involved. And some of these kids are now going on to select ball. The culture, the game has changed quite a bit just in the last 15, 20 years. I think the focus has really been on, getting your kid that D1 scholarship or trying to prepare them for pro ball. And the perspective I had with my sons, and my wife will tell you, I had dreams of them playing professionally, but we were really careful about constructing our perspective and the reason why. Why are our kids in sport? And from my perspective, it's really about building their character, teaching them the right virtues, the things that they're going to learn from a character and skill base that are going to last them their entire lifetimes by participating in athletics. And I learned so much I was able to apply in my business life, my personal life, that have helped me as just a human being. And I think that really the catalyst of the book was laying out a blueprint for parents to say, let's keep the focus where it should be, on teaching our kids the right character skills and life skills that are going to last forever. Let winning be a byproduct of what they're learning. And let's not get caught up in chasing plastic trophies and trying to earn scholarships. That is not the right path for your kids. Let that just be a development piece of what happens when we're doing the right things with them by engaging in athletic activities.
That's great. Again, the book is called More Than the Score: How Parents and Coaches Can Cultivate Virtue in Youth Athletes. Andy Pettitte wrote the foreword, the 5-time World Series champion with the Yankees and with the Astros, pitcher there. Truly had a great career too. So that's pretty awesome that you wrote this book. So let me ask you, as we wind down, what is your biggest concern right now going forward with sports parenting, where we are in 2020? Because there's obviously hope and there's a blueprint right here with the book. But what's the big concern right now? What are you thinking that you're seeing and we gotta nip this thing, number one, in the bud to make sure we get this thing going in the right path?
Yeah, Jason, it goes back to what we talked about even in my own life, making sport my God, right? It's from a faith perspective, as parents, we've got to keep focusing on discipling our kids. And let sport add to that. I mean, there's so many things that our kids can learn from sporting activities. So don't deny them of that, but think about, especially if they're playing competitively in a select sports environment, and you're taking them out of church on Sundays, and they're not giving that community of believers around them that are helping to disciple them as well. That's where our focus has to be. We've got to get back to focusing on how are my kids learning about God, and how are they honoring Him as they play in the game. And let your kids be a divine missionary on the sports field. That should be our focus as parents. Let the winning, let the fun, all that be a byproduct of what we're doing in terms of leading them closer to God.
He is Pat Combs, the former Major League pitcher, Team USA gold medal winner, and now the author of the book, More Than the Score. Pat, this has been great. We'll get you back on. Maybe we'll meet in person sometime too, and we'll tell some more stories, because I didn't even get to your Major League debut when you're facing the Pittsburgh Pirates in September of 1989, and Barry Bonds and Bobby Bonilla and that team that turned into a powerhouse for a few years. But we'll save that for next time. Pat, thanks for joining us, and really appreciate the time here.
Oh, Jason, thanks for having me. Appreciate you. Keep it going strong, man. Thank you.
And many thanks to Pat Combs for joining us today on Sports Spectrum, the author of the new book, More Than the Score. It's available now everywhere books are found. You need to go get a copy. It's a great blueprint, especially if you're a coach of youth, talking about 10, 11, 12-year-old kids. If you're a parent to a kid playing youth sports, and I'm talking about from the ages of 8 all the way through to high school, this is a great book to get. It's a blueprint, and it will help you along in your journey to be better as a sports parent and to really focus on the things that truly matter. Character, we're talking about faith, important things, not just what they do and accomplish on the field. More Than the Score. It's Pat Combs' new book, and thanks to Pat for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. We also thank our sponsors and partners today on the show, Compassion International. Check out fillthestadium.com right now. They need your help to these children that are stuck in poverty, in crisis. We're trying to save them through Fill the Stadium, and you can help be a part of an amazing journey with Compassion International and pro athletes with Fill the Stadium. Check it out, fillthestadium.com. Click Give Now and help us release these children from poverty. fillthestadium.com. We also thank IJM, the International Justice Mission, and the work they are doing is so important. Great partners in the work of justice, helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence and slavery around the world. Check them out at ijm.org/TF. Become a Freedom Partner. Donate, partner with them, and help join the fight to end slavery in our lifetime. ijm.org/TF. Thank you again for tuning in to today's show. My name is Jason. We love you guys. Do us one quick favor, if you could, before we say goodbye. Click that subscribe button on whatever app you're listening to this podcast on so that you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. And then check out at sportspectrum.com our Sports Spectrum Podcast Network. We got a network of shows now that you want to subscribe to. All of our podcasts now, between Sports Spectrum Show, Table 40, hosted by Matt Holliday, the 8-time MLB All-Star, and his wife Leslie. We have Football Sundays podcast, which is great. Short, quick form, 7-8 minute stories from pro athletes, current and former NFL players on how God has worked in their lives. So that's the Football Sunday podcast. And then our brand new podcast, which just released a few days ago, called Recalibrated, hosted by Mallory Brown, who is the wife of Donald Brown, the former NFL running back, and really taking a deeper dive into the women in pro sports, the wives, the girlfriends, the women in pro sports who love Jesus. This is a podcast that you want to listen to. If you're a guy and you got a wife or a girlfriend, tell them to subscribe to the Recalibrated podcast with Mallory Brown. It's a great listen. All a part of the Sports Spectrum Podcast Network. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time right here on Sports Spectrum. Have a great rest of your day.